Hey everybody, today we wanted to talk about incorporating family members and friends into your training with your horse, both because potentially, things will happen like you're going to be out of town or you might be sick or who knows. Hopefully nothing bad happens, but we need to sometimes have other people to help take care of our horses, even if it's barn friends or family members, things like that. And also, additionally, in intentional preparation and training. So, when we need to generalize behaviors to other people, so our horses don't just lead safely next to us or hoof handle with just us, they need to be able to hoof handle with the farrier. They need to be able to be caught from the pasture by the barn manager, and so on and so forth. And so, we're going to talk about finding and working with people that can help you work with your horse so that these behaviors can become more functional, more resilient, safer, and just overall, just really practical behaviors for your horse to have that are just rock solid that you can feel at ease. Like if you have to ask a friend to go bring your horse in during a storm or something, your horse is gonna be like, yeah, cool, this is what we do. So I've got Megan here with me today. We're going to be discussing working with friends and family and with our horses. So, welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
So, tell me a little bit about your experience with incorporating family members into training with your horses, because I know you have some very willing family members that support you and are willing to engage and help with the training sessions. How did you go about asking for that support? And then kind of what does that look like as you've brought your family members into doing the training sessions with your horses?
Yeah, so like you said, I feel very fortunate to have very willing family members and friends. So shout out to them for being so willing. But normally is how it first started is it was kind of a blend between horse sitting and then also helping with training. Um, I'm also very fortunate that those family members are very willing to help care for my horses when I go on vacation. I have a extra busy day and I just really need help. They're very willing to come help, whether that be like my parents, because then they're the grand horses, or other family members. They definitely see the horses as part of the family as well. So I love that and love that they are so willing to help. And that all stemmed from mostly, I would say, chore help. Chores are very easy for even people with no horse experience. If I just needed help, cleaning the paddock or just like filling water, helping me with some hay. Those people were very willing and didn't have to have much horse experience in order to help me with those things. And then they just kept, expressing that they had a actual pleasurable time and they're like, this is actually fun and like therapeutic. So I was like, okay, awesome, I'll keep that in mind. And then that just kind of morphed into help with training, whether that be I need to do something with my horses, like if I need to trim one of my horses, it's just a lot easier to have someone there holding, and I do like an open bar with them, open bar feeding. So that was really easy for me to just ask someone to come in and just feed my horse while I do this. But then that also goes into more in-depth training with like preparation things like you mentioned about generalizing, because then that's also helpful for a horse sitting situation where they still need to know how to halter my horse in case anything happened and lead them in case anything happened. So all of that kind of ties in together, and I guess that's how it all morphed into it.
So it started off as, hey, family, come help me because you're family and you get roped into things like
Mhm.
this. And then it turned into this reinforcing experience for them that you were able to like slowly drag them along and get them hooked. And it's like, welcome to the dark side of being a horse
I'm like,
person.
hey, can you help me with this?
Mhm. What would be some of the benefits of for let's focus on for you. Let's focus on for the horses first. So, like, what are some of the benefits that you've seen for your horses by incorporating family members, or as I've said before, it could also be friends, it could be other people at the barn, just incorporating other people into the interactions, into the training. What are some of the benefits that you've seen?
One of the biggest benefits, kind of in a more general sense, is that my horses are definitely a lot more comfortable being around various people. I remember right when I adopted Optimus, he definitely had like a stranger danger type of mentality, especially with, men, bigger humans, people who are tall. He was like, "You are ginormous." Anyway, so I've noticed over time that he is now much more um, willing to approach new people and people who he's only seen maybe once or twice. It doesn't matter. So much to where the people who he sees like more regularly, they start to get really excited to see those people. And they, meet them from far away. They'll call to them like when they first arrive because we have all of those positive associations with various people doing different things, that they really are much more social butterflies with different people.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. And especially if your horses are regularly handled by just one person. Like let's say you have your horses at home or it's a self-board, self-care type boarding situation, then your horses are not really getting a lot of exposure to other people. And so we can feel like our horses are a certain way or have certain behaviors. But then as soon as another person comes into the environment, it can change everything because the antecedents have changed. The environment has changed because the person is different. And so not everything holds up, and or a lot of horses unfortunately are coming from environments where their experiences with other people are not good. And so we become the exception to the rule. And I've worked with a lot of horses like this, even my own, where they change a lot. So like let's say we have a horse that um, comes from a situation where they're handled really roughly and they're very distrusting of people. They're really anxious or they shut down and they start to learn with me or one of you guys that life is not so bad. Like people are okay, that we have good outcomes. They learn to trust. They really start to open up. They start to be heard. They can communicate freely, all that. It can be really tempting for us to think immediately like, okay, it's fixed. Like not it, the horse, but just these concerns. We've healed, the horse is healed, they're doing better, all that. And they have with you. You are now the exception to the rule. They still think of all other people potentially as a potential threat. And so that generalizing process of bringing other people around and showing them like this person is good, this person is good, this person does the same things I do, this person does the same things I do, and like in their own way, but it's still good outcomes, really builds those new positive associations with a lot of different people so that again, should an emergency happen or anything, you just have somebody come help you out with your horses for a little while, your horse doesn't revert back to immediately thinking I'm in danger again. And so this is such an important step in that healing process of helping our horses understand that it's not going to be like before. But that also requires us to be very careful about who we bring around our horses early on, especially, and making sure that there are those good experiences, that they do have those good outcomes. And this requires educating and training those other people potentially, which can get challenging, especially with family members, because they're not your students, right? They're not like paying you usually to train them. They're doing you a favor. So you're now in this position of they're doing you a favor, but also we need it to be done this way. So there's like rules and guidelines around it. Um, did you ever find that with your own family members that this was a sticky kind of situation, or were they kind of, did they go with it, or any navigation around that?
I would say for the most part, they were all pretty much okay with my protocols, I would say. Or if something would come up, it's definitely that fine line to where I do feel bad. I'm like, you're doing me a favor. I don't want to like change the way you're helping me because you're helping me. But it would just be little things, kind of just like, yeah, we're going with this horse, or here with my horses, I'm going to have you do this. Um, kind of, and then you can go into the reason why. I like to generally keep it very simple, kind of to not kind of over explain a little bit, but definitely just kind of like planting that and be like, here with this horse, we do this, and kind of just like leave it at that. It's like being firm, but not really.
Yeah, it's setting expectations and clear boundaries for you or for the horse, because it's our responsibility as their caregiver to set those boundaries for our horse, to be their protector and their guide and their caregiver, and guardian, or some people want to refer to it, what are all the words that we want to use. But it is our responsibility to advocate for them. And so we can do that in a way, like you're explaining, that is respectful to people, and but it's also clear. Like, this is what we do with this horse. And that's just it. It's just the end of the conversation. That's just what
Right.
we do. um, Sometimes you'll get some pushback, and it can be a tricky path to walk, because we get into these situations where you have to start weighing the pros and cons and how much you really need this particular person's help. Can we find another person? Sometimes we don't have another option. This is the only person. And there can become a lot of navigating a tricky relationship and getting to where we need to be going and achieving what it is we need to be achieving, while also keeping everybody happy and not getting anybody hurt and or angry and upset. And so this can take a lot of very careful conversations, crucial and important, carefully managed conversations. I do find that if we don't approach it with the mentality of, here, let me teach you, and instead it's, hey, for this horse, we do it this way, or I need you to do it this way so that we all stay safe and happy, whatever. And just kind of leave it, like you said, like, don't go into it too far unless they really start pushing. But it's pretty clear up front, like, this is what we do. And you can, if they really ask for it, well, why? You could say, well, based on past experiences or something like that. I've even not necessarily lied, but expanded on certain things for horses. Like, one time I had a horse that I was taking to a vet clinic. Great vet clinic. I don't have a problem with the vet clinic, but the horse very much needed to not be handled harshly. Like, it was critical that they not correct her or get firm-handed with her because of her past. And I knew that they were setting, like, I was going to set them up for failure and my horse up for failure. If I handed over my horse, it was a situation where I had to hand over the horse to the tech. And I knew that if they were gentle with her and gave her time to process things, things would go smoothly. Like, everything would go beautifully, which I find is mostly the case. But in this particular one, I knew if they didn't, it was going to blow up and get really bad really fast and would set back all of our training and get somebody hurt. So when I talked to them, I was very clear. I was very upfront. I said, she's really great, but you have to stay patient and slow. Like, when you cue for things, be slow about it. And if she doesn't respond right away, count to a minute or count to 90 seconds. Like, you just give her some time to process what you're asking. And then you can ask again the same way. Don't escalate. So I gave him some real simple, like, guidelines of how to interact, rather than going through an entire dissertation about all of her cues and everything, because I had trained all of them to be really traditional alike. So she was fine with all that. She just needed things to be patient and calm. And it went beautifully. And I told them at the time, I said, she's had a rough background. She can get scared of people quickly if they start escalating pressure. And but she's so easygoing if you give her the space and the time that she needs. And they were like, oh, yeah, not a problem. We get it. And they were able to do it. But it kind of stopped that. It gave us a moment to have that conversation up front, to get onto the same page, to not just rush into this and make this a blurry mess and just treat her like every other horse. But if you can get people to stop and have that short conversation with you, give them a couple guidelines, and it's just, hey, this is just how it is for this horse. It goes better if you do it this way, and then we're done. And then usually people will do that. Now, if they don't, that's a whole nother story. And we have to start navigating well, how much do we need this? Is it total emergency? Is it something where we can work on some more training together, some more hands-on practice together? Or maybe I need to find somebody else if they keep pushing. But we don't always have that option. So sometimes you do get in situations where it is what it is, and you just have to make the best of it. Yeah. And another thought, and actually before I go into my next one, I want to hear if you have any thoughts on some different ways that you have helped, or even for your clients, that you've helped them have conversations with family members or other barn staff in working with their horses. Like, how do you help them get on the same page with the other people that are interacting with their horses?
Yeah, so I think it really ultimately we all want to be on the same team. So we could really cater certain conversations to hopefully like lean the way we want it to go. Not in like any manipulative way or anything, but we could just set up the situation and the environment in a way that does not go downhill, and it stays on track for being a calm and collected conversation. And I think ultimately the people we have for help, whether that be family, friends, barn staff, other horse people, if they're helping us, especially with our own horse, they don't want to mess anything up, and they really just want to do it correctly as well. So, and especially if you come from a place of like tapping into some empathy, saying like, for this horse, you could go into like some of the background with the horse, like what the horse has been through, you could go a little bit deeper into why we do it this specific way for this horse. That we keep it, very positive, very low stress. It's what she excels in. And just making it be very clear and that we want everyone to succeed. And for the most part, unless it kind of takes a turn, that should be a really good setup for a conversation, that we all just want to be on the same team. We all want to be safe, and we all want what is also the best for the horse. So then coming from a place of empathy from their past and stuff like that, I think is a good setup.
Additionally, I'm glad you brought up the safety part, because setting the other person up for success and communicating to them that you have their best interest in mind and you want this to be a good outcome for them, and even bringing that into the conversation of, well, what is important to you, and what are you feeling in this situation, or what is it that I need to do to help you be able to help me, right? Because especially in like boarding facilities, like let's say barn manager, we're asking them to put a bandage on a horse or hold the horse for the farrier or whatever it is. They're short on time. They're short on time. They're short on energy. They're probably short on money. They're probably short on physical ability to do certain things. A lot of us horse people that have been around for a while have injuries that we can only handle so much of our horses yanking on us or whatever. So we have to make their jobs easier so that they are willing to help us and they continue to have a good outcome for them too. And if we can communicate that to them in this conversation, like, first of all, before we go any further, my interest is making sure that you're safe, you're happy, and we're on the same page and we're all successful. Like, I want that for all of us. Here's what I know and what I do with this horse that will work and will support what you're after and also what I'm after. And like kind of showing everybody how all of these dots connect, and I'm going to make it work for everybody. But the big piece of this puzzle is we have to be super proactive caregivers. So we have to be super proactive trainers. If I know I have a horse that's yanking her right front and it's really upsetting the farrier kind of thing, but I rely on the farrier to help me out with the hoof trimming, right? It's a professional. Or let's say we have a friend that feeds our horses on Sundays so that we can have a day off, or we have to work on that day. And the horse is chasing off the other horses, or is being really pushy at feeding time. That's a good example. Is being really pushy at feeding time. What can I do as a proactive trainer and caregiver? What can I do to make this as easy as possible for the person that's helping me out? Because I want it to be so easy and safe and feel good for them. So antecedent arrangements, changing what the feeding routine looks like so that they're not able to push into the person, like they're behind a fence barrier, changing up, like maybe even something as simple as scattering some hay cubes or pellets before, broken up hay cubes, by the way, before you even go with the feed bucket. So they have something they're doing, they're busy with, or like enrichment activity. Like there's so many things we can do to de-escalate the situation and make it as easy as possible for the people that were asking to help us. And this can be such a big step to making sure that they want to come back and help us some more. And going back to your talking about your family members, finding it reinforcing, finding it enjoyable, therapeutic, and wanting to do more and wanting to help you more. Well, it's not going to be that way if it's miserable for them, or if it's hard, or if they're getting hurt, or it's unsafe, or whatever, and so on. So that's a huge part of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so let's talk about how to prepare people or our horses to be able to help us out. So how do we help prepare people to help us with their horses? And then how do we help our horses, or kind of mixing it all together, to be able to be interacted with by other people so that it helps us out, or whatever.
Yeah, so I'll piggyback off of what you just mentioned, which is we have to be proactive and making sure that our horses know what to do, because they're the main component. So let's say if I am having someone hold and feed my horse while I trim their feet, if the horse is very fidgety, antsy, very anxious for hoof handling and trimming and the equipment and everything, the helper is going to have a very bad experience. They're going to be flustered because they don't know what to do to help. It's going to put them in danger, and it's just going to be very chaotic. So no matter what I am asking help for with my horses, the horse needs to know what to do as well. If they are calm and chill about the situation, getting their feet done, then I could have a helper. If they are not, then I have more work to do before I ask for help. And then for the human side of it, so if I use that example of someone coming to hold and feed my horse while I trim their feet, definitely the first step is having clear expectations of the routine, keeping it very, very simple and concise. And in that scenario, it is only someone holding and feeding the horse. The holding part is really irrelevant because the horse would stand there even without like a halter and lead too. So that part's irrelevant. But for teaching them how I want them to feed the horse, that takes just like a couple of key pointers that I want them to keep in their mind, and just really easy, actionable steps. And especially just standing there and feeding a horse is a very easy thing to do.
But
Besides,
also, it's more complicated than people
oh,
realize, too.
for sure, there's
Yeah.
so much that goes into it. But it could be an easy way to get someone to help, because you
Yes.
say, you're just coming to feed my horse. Just
Yeah.
stand there and feed my horse.
Everybody loves feeding horses.
Yes.
Especially
So a
non-horse
couple,
people love feeding horses.
yeah, they just love, because then it's also, if all goes well, it's a very peaceful interaction too, because they could kind of just chill there and just feed the horse. So some of the pointers that I mentioned to them, and I always make sure that we practice before we get the horse because this is a very new thing for them. So I even pretend to be a horse and pretend that they're feeding me and I'm taking the food from them, and then coaching them through what they're doing. But some things that really are important for hand feeding, at least in an open bar scenario, is how often they're feeding. And so at like what rate, how quickly, if I want more time in between the feedings. And that really depends on the horse, what we're doing. Making sure that the horse is comfortable being fed as well. So the owner or the helper is not feeding the horse in a way where the horse has to like
Yeah.
curl or like really reach for the food. The owner is keeping a very steady hand with, tight fingers so the horse can easily take food from them. Um, and then I also go over some like code words that I could use in the moment. If I need a quick break, I just say like food on the ground, because that's the horse can eat off the ground as I, give more pointers, more direction or something like that. And then we also go over what to do after we're done. Or if I don't do that before, I do that. I say, okay, food on the ground. And then I say, okay, this is what we do to end it. So beginning is more of like a spiel, but I still really try to keep it as simple, just a couple things that they could keep in their mind. And then during the procedure, I still keep an eye and I tell them to make some adjustments where needed.
Yeah, I like that you brought up code words. There's a lot that you could kind of discuss ahead of time. Like, it depends on what you're doing, but just feed a little more often. That just means like literally, well, I mean, that one's pretty straightforward, but there's some different things that you could say ahead of time. That way you're not spending while you're underneath the horse's feet or whatever, going through like a whole dissertation on whatever it is you're asking them to do. But even for times where you're not actively there, like let's say you're not there and you're asking a family member to go out and feed, going through a practice run with them ahead of time when it's not feeding time, like you said, is really helpful. Talking about how to set things up so everybody's nice and calm. Talking about what to do if things go wrong. That one I find is really important. So, hey, if you notice a horse is getting really stressed, or if they're getting pushy, or you might know some things that your horse is prone to doing if things don't go well, hey, if you see this, do this, right? Just go over a couple of likely scenarios. And sometimes I'm just gonna say it. Sometimes this is easier with non-horse people. With horse people, it can be
Yeah.
harder because they have their own idea of how things should go. And I'm going to speak directly to horse people here for a moment. If somebody else is asking you to help with their horse, it's not a time to project your own training ideals and your own routines into the other person's life or their horse's routine, because there's not one universal way to do everything. Actually, there's so many ways to do just about everything, and there's not a right or wrong. As long as everybody's safe and happy and well fed at the end of the day, we're all good. Like everything's good. Unless there's outright abuse, we're all good. And so I would encourage you guys to go into it with an open mind and try and keep everybody, happy and safe at the end of the day. And even if you feel like that person is not doing things the way that you would want them to do, or that you feel are best, or whatever it is, by spending at least a while doing things the way that they want you to do them and doing them well, and building that relationship, building that connection there, and having that back and forth beneficial relationship. Maybe they help you out sometimes, you help them out sometimes, right? It opens up that door to be able to have these really healthy conversations where we can ask things like, hey, have you ever talked to a behavior consultant about your horse's resource guarding? Or maybe that's a little intense, but like maybe we go in with something like, hey, I noticed that Fluffy gets a little pushy around feeding time. That's super interesting. What do you where do you think that comes from? Like opening up the door to having these conversations where then maybe, eventually they're like, yeah, what would you do about it? And you're like, I'm so glad you asked. And then we can have a conversation. But if you just come in guns blazing kind of situation and you're like, you should be doing it this way and you should be doing it that way, you really close off that door. And there's no more healthy conversations that happen at that point. And then from the other side of the equation, if you're asking somebody who is a horse person to help you and you're finding that they are resistant to doing some of these things, you're not going to be able to make them do anything. But you're going to have to try not to, I'm not exactly sure what the right word would be here, but to approach this with a sense of, I know what I'm doing and I'm teaching you. Instead, it's more of like, this is just what we do. I'm totally respectful of what you do. This is just what we do. I hope you don't mind, kind of thing. Like, just kind of not being defensive or um, going at them at all, but also being firm with how you want your horses taken care of, being firm with your boundaries there, and just trying to have that mutually respectful conversation there. And you might want to minimize some of the practicing before we get our horse out stuff, because a lot of times they are experienced horse people, so in certain ways. And so we can bypass, like, here's how you put a halter on. Usually that's okay, unless your horse has a very specific, like, I have to put the halter on this way. I would just kind of skip to the really critical parts of, or maybe we just don't put a halter on. Like if we're talking about feeding during trimming, can you just put food here and just over and over again, just put food here and just simplify a lot of the dialogue and just show them like put food here, and then let them do it. And if you need to give some pointers during, cool, but try not to go through a whole like hour long walking them through where they feel like they're in a lesson, right? And you're their coach. So try and minimize that a little bit while also making sure that you're still getting a good outcome for both of you guys. All right. So what else could we add here? So we've talked a lot about how we can discuss with people. Oh, you know what I want to talk about is, let's talk about the types of conversations or some of the ways that we can approach talking to family members or other horse people. And we're going to have to touch on this briefly because this is a really big conversation in its own. When they're skeptical of the way that we do things, when they're skeptical of what clicker training is or how it works, or like, why don't you just do it like I saw in the movie? The Horse Whisperer did it this way. Why don't you do it that way? How would you go about talking to a family member or a friend who is expressing some hesitations or concerns around the approach that you were taking, or some just lack of understanding? Maybe there's some judgment in it, maybe not. Maybe it's purely like, I just don't understand why you don't do it this way, and it's coming from a good place. How would you go about that?
So this is a situation where I still like to keep things as simple as possible. It's not when we're trying to make things sound like I don't know, big words and fluffy and just, I don't know, like going overboard. We could just really keep things really simple, just being like, I use food rewards to teach my horses new behaviors. It's, very effective, safe, very positive, fun. So just like a couple of things. And then if you're using like clicker training, for example, and they are just really confused, let's say clicker training could seem really weird from someone who doesn't know. So we could, just briefly go, we use a clicker, it's a marker signal to show the horse, exactly when they did the right behavior. So it's very precise. And then we can build and teach new behaviors very quickly. I often refer to dog training too, just as like an easy reference, because it is much more accepted and common for dogs to at least get a lot of food rewards and then use clicker training as well. So then just like bridging that gap, being like, we do the same thing for horses. It's exactly the same. And yeah, just kind of really keeping it basic, just going over that it works really well for me and my horse. So it's a really good fit for us. And then I think if you are talking with a horse person, I think it's really important to be mindful about how we word things, because the way that we word our description of positive reinforcement and what we're doing with our horse, we don't want it to accidentally be like bashing what they're doing. So we really want to kind of try to step away from saying phrases like, we do this instead of this. Without that quote instead of, because they could very likely be doing that instead of, and it, so we don't want them to be like, oh, wow, okay, rude. Like that's what I do. So really just keep it focused on yourself. And just that it works for you guys. It's awesome. You love it. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I like to focus on our own journey, my journey with my horses. I will often bring in marine animals or exotics too. I'll say something like, yeah, it's like a super common training approach with a lot of different species throughout the world. I mean, from elephants to snakes to lions to zebras to dogs and to dolphins. All species learn this way. I've had really great results with my own horses. I find that it helps build a lot of trust and really strengthens the partnership and the relationship. The timing is really great. I've also seen a lot of benefits in how it carries over to doing other types of training too, just improving on my skills. Um, and overall, I've just noticed a really big improvement in my horse's general attitude and welfare, and also in my own. I just enjoy it a whole lot more than I've enjoyed anything else. And then I'll try and avoid words like, by definition, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, all that. I will say positive reinforcement or I'll say clicker training, whichever. But I usually try and avoid saying negative reinforcement until we're further into the conversation. Because if you start bringing out negative versus positive, it instantly puts people on the defense, right? Even though that's not technically what it means. It's not an emotional positive versus negative. It's a addition versus subtraction or removal. But they're not aware of that yet. And so you're bringing in terminology in a level of a conversation that we're not quite ready for yet. We haven't built this relationship and on this topic up enough yet where we can have this, or the backstory of it really. And so that can make it really defensive really quickly. So I agree with you. Overall, it's about not making it you versus them, or you versus or positive reinforcement versus every other training method out there. It's like, you don't even mention all of the other stuff. This is what works for you, and it's awesome, and here's all the benefits that I've seen. And I just stick to that story until I feel like people really want to know more, until they're like, okay, I see it. I see the results. I see what you're talking about. Tell me more. I want to know specifically now, how do I do this kind of thing? That's when we start diving into it. But until that person's ready to hear and learn for real, it's all going to become a battle and defensive, and you're going to turn people off in a way, and you're going to create problems, especially if you want them to help you out with your horses. And another kind of, we'll bring it full circle back around to the original of having our family member and friends really help us with our horses. It's really important that, again, we try and make things as easy for them as we can. And this probably could have belonged earlier in the conversation, but I just thought of it now. So we're bringing it in right now, where when you're working with your horses, like you said, like preparing your horses ahead of time for working with other people, they really need to know what it is that they're going to be doing and how to do it and well before you bring in somebody else. Unless the person is helping you do the training, which that also has its place. But let's say it's somebody helping you feeding time or something like that. They really need to know the routine. They need to know what to do. Then it's also important that we as the caregivers purposely set them up to learn it in such a way where it is kind of normal, right? It's done differently because of how we do things. We reduce stress, like all this other stuff. Maybe it's done with positive reinforcement. But the end result and the practical application of it all looks very normal. And it's as least a little amount of change as possible for our helpers, for the people that are helping us out. And I feel like this ties into the conversation too. And the reason my brain kind of connected those two is because when it's so different and when we're confronting them with this, well, you got to change this and you've got to act this way differently and you have to do all this clicking and you have to do all this feeding and you have to do all of these things that are completely opposite of anything they're used to, we're really putting them in an unsafe, like as far as nervous system safe brain place goes, right? Because they don't have their long learning history to rely on of the behaviors that they're familiar with that keep them safe, that get them the access to the reinforcer, right? So they don't have all this learning history anymore, and all of a sudden they're novices in the beginning, and it's like an unsafe place, right, for the body and the brain. So when we can, another way we can help them, and it goes along with the dialogue and everything else, is by setting everybody up for something that feels safe and comfortable. For the horses, it's something they know, they do well. And for the people, it's normal and it looks and it's safe and it goes smoothly. And then for us, it's easy to communicate to other people and to have other people help us with, and also for easy for us to do on a daily basis with our own horses. And so if we can get all three of those in a nice little package, that's going to have that best outcome for everybody.
Very collaborative between us, the horse, and the helper.
Absolutely.
Everything just meshes and falls into place.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for joining us today. And as always, guys, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments. We're more than happy to answer. And if you want to hear more, tune into our next video. We'll see you guys then. Thank you, everybody. Bye.